Welcome to the show, Carolyn Bankston.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, tell the listener, I just did a formal intro of you, but how do you introduce yourself?
I typically talk a little bit about how I got into this work. And I work with personality disorders, which I think that term scares a lot of people. I think people think of the DSM and hospitalizations and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
When personality disorder really runs, right, exactly.
Got my DSM here.
Really and truly runs a continuum, just like all other disorders. So it's a very useful tool for working with people who are even higher functioning and have particular, maybe you would want to call personality styles. Mm-hmm. So how I got into this work is...
And to be clear, you're a psychologist, psychotherapist, psychiatrist?
I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I got into this work before I became interested and fully steeped in personality disorders. I got into this work because I was in my own psychotherapy. So I had quite a difficult childhood, left me with a lot of anxiety and depression, more anxiety than depression. And I found myself at the age of 24, married, a couple of months into my marriage, and really struggling and realizing that I didn't have a clue how to do a relationship, not a clue. And so, yeah, and didn't have a clue how to, and first and foremost, how to have a relationship with myself. Mm-hmm. That's where it all starts. So I started this journey of psychotherapy, a really good therapist, not the therapist that would get me through, but a very good start. And I just became fascinated by the process. So I went back to school and got my master's in clinical social work. And during my supervision process, after I graduated, my first supervisor was a Masterson graduate. Uh-huh. So I teach now. I graduated with a 3-year postgraduate certificate from the Masterson Institute. And so my first supervisor, it fell in my lap, really. Yeah. And was so useful because at the time I was working with victims of domestic violence and working with teenagers in the criminal justice system and their families. Mm-hmm. So there was just kind of disorder all over the place. And it's very overwhelming to work with that level of disorder and not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And primarily to know what to do with a personality disorder that is really that kind of low-level functioning personality disorder, you have to really figure out a lot about how you feel with that person because there are so many projections and so much shooting at you all the time. Mm-hmm. It just renders you thoughtless.
Yeah. You really get sucked in to the dynamic, right? If you're not paying attention.
Really sucked in. Yeah. So my own psychotherapy that I went through for many years, I'm still in, but I feel like I'm over that hump. I feel like it really saved my life. And I don't mean that in a way that I was suicidal. I was never suicidal, but I would not have had a real life without my therapy.
Yeah, same. I mean, I would have just been a ghost of a human.
Yeah. Just not really living, right?
Right. Yeah. Getting by.
Getting by. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So it was from my own early experience, with a very dysfunctional, scary family.
Siblings?
Yes, a brother and a sister who didn't fare well. Mm-hmm. And that was part of my difficulty was I was a real survivor of my family. And I had a lot of survivor guilt. Mm-hmm. So that really drove me to become a therapist. I just figured out that I had a real knack for it. I have a real connection to my emotions, but I'm also deeply analytical. Mm-hmm. So I just thought, well, this is just perfect for me. It's my space. Yeah. I can do this. I can do this. And just really lucky, a true luck that I started out with that sort of training.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool because I love hearing that most social workers and psychotherapists, counselor, healer types had some level of challenge in their childhood, and they developed a keen sense of like being tuned into the environment or others and trying to help people. And it just sort of, it just makes sense basically why you are doing what you do based on what you shared with us in your childhood.
Yeah, that's right. It really kind of is my superpower to really feel into very quickly what's happening and what's going on.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything.
Same.
But I worked with it.
Yeah. And okay, great. So why do you say that? I worked with it. You added that was
there
important,
are so many walking wounded in the world that they have had worse than I did, maybe the same, maybe a little bit better, and they are not functioning well. They may look like it on the surface, but they are not functioning well.
Totally.
So you really have to take that experience and make it something. You really have to grow up.
Yeah. And this is I wasn't planning on asking this question. We'll get into Masterson and all the personality stuff here in a minute. But why do you think you were able to make the journey and other people can't? And you probably know people in your life that, like you said, had worse, better, whatever challenges, and they didn't do anything with it, and they didn't work with it, as you said. What's going on there? I always ask people that. It's a hard one.
I don't know. I've been doing this for 23, really almost 25 years, if you include my internship. I don't know. I do know some of it is, I do know some people get so incredibly damaged and it's very hard to come back from. I do know that.
Yeah.
But there are people that I would say that are, were functioning like me and they don't do the work. Mm-hmm. I will say how I survived my childhood. It's interesting. I had more neglect in my childhood, and it actually served me better in ways that I didn't have too much interaction. And I also had a woman in my neighborhood who really raised me.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, but I get your question. It's one I ask all the time. Who are, the people who leave therapy? I'm a really good therapist, but I can't make anyone do therapy, right?
Exactly.
It's, it's up to that person. It's a very personal decision. And there are all sorts of factors. They might be in a new relationship and that goes on for 3 or 4 years and then they get hopeless. I'm too old, or it's all over the board, I think.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, why there's so many things to study as a therapist. And you chose personality disorders. Now I know that there's a lot of things within that you can still continue to study, from mental health disorders to couples work to whatever.
Right.
But why personality disorders specifically? And let's get into defining the terms here, as well. Who is Masterson? What is a personality disorder, et cetera?
So Dr. Masterson was a psychiatrist, and how he started his work is he had a clinic at the Payne Whitney Clinic for adolescents. And he started working with these adolescents in the inpatient unit. And he did a study on these patients and the therapy that he was developing. And what he discovered was that as the teenagers acting out was curbed, as they settled down in terms of their behavior, they became more depressed. Mm-hmm. And so what he surmised from this, and many other theorists, but he did his own study, is that the acting out was serving to not deal with the internal world and the emotions that were going on. With that, he studied their backgrounds and discovered that there were real issues between the teenagers and their primary person. I say primary person because now we have, 2 men raising children, we have 2 women raising children, but it's the person who is primarily emotionally responsible for that child. So at that time, it was usually a mother. Mm-hmm. Yep. So he did these studies and he really saw the dysfunctional patterns and how that contributed to the personality disorder, the development of the child, which the primary developmental years for personality are 0 to 3. It doesn't mean that development doesn't happen beyond that, or that it can't change, or any of that. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But the primary years are 0 to 3.
Yep.
And so he was able to trace back with these children, with these teenagers, really get very detailed histories, and really see how the interactional patterns between the mother and the child, and the emotions attached to those interactional patterns, come to form the personality, what he called the intrapsychic structure.
Yeah, and I've heard personality disorders also be labeled a disorder of the self.
That's correct.
Because the self develops in the context of a relationship, right? In those first 3 years,
Right.
This emerging self. It's such an important developmental time. And basically, kind of what you're saying, and what Masterson says, if my limited understanding is, there's enough challenges that happen in the interpersonal space that the development of the self gets compromised in some way.
That's correct. The development of the self gets formed around the object, the other.
Yep, totally.
Almost wholly.
Yeah. So give us a concrete example so we know what you're talking about. If we've got an infant, and the mother dynamic is what would then get developed?
Well, for instance, if you were looking at the borderline disorder, they have an issue with any sort of separation away from the mother. So what develops in that relationship is that the child, there's a sense that I cannot handle myself without my other, without my mother, without my primary person, whoever that is. I don't have the equipment to be able to self-soothe, to take care of myself. So they learn this very early on. And then you see as adults, that is the same dynamic that they do in relationship with pretty much everyone in their life.
Yeah.
I need to be taken care of. I can't do this.
Especially close relationships, right?
That's right. But even they'll do it with kind of everyone. But yes, you'll really see it in very close relationships.
Yeah. This is so fascinating. So let's stay with that example, and then we can get into maybe a narcissistic sort of dynamic or disorder, and maybe even an avoidant and some of the others. In the borderline example that you just shared, what is going on for the mother that would treat a young child that way? What's the psychology and experience of a mother like that?
Well, what I'll say about personality disorders is that it runs through generations. So it's typically something that cycles through. Yeah. So that mother probably had that experience with her mother or primary, whoever, whether she was raised by grandmother, mother, whomever. What is typically going on for a mother in this situation is that she does not want to feel alone. That's true of all the disorders, by the way, but they need to be needed. They need that constant contact.
Yeah.
And it really stunts the development of the child, because the child really needs to learn over time. Oh, I'm okay. I can do this.
Yeah.
That's what they internalize, though, from the object.
Right.
So when you have the baby who's screaming their head off and you have no idea what's going on, primarily what's happening is an unconscious process. It's not a conscious process. Yeah. So you're holding, right? Emotionally, you're holding that child. Over time, you step away more and more from that. The child learns, they take you in internally, this kind of, you're okay.
Yeah, because they say, I'm okay. They learn, I'm okay. I can handle this big emotion.
That's exactly right. They internalize it.
Yeah.
So for a borderline mother, they don't want the child. And again, this is mostly unconscious, almost entirely unconscious.
Yeah.
They don't want the child to feel that sense of independence, because they always want that child.
They need it.
They need it.
They need the child to lean on them and depend on them.
Right.
And there's a real fear of loss there, it sounds like, for the mother.
Massive.
Like, gosh, if you're independent and you're actually okay on your own, then who am I? I have to deal with my terror and annihilatory feelings about, like, I don't even know who I am then.
That's exactly right.
Man, I've actually witnessed this not only with clients, but in a larger community, watching people over many years raise children, it's like, wow, I see the dynamic that you're describing actually. And it's painful to watch because the mother in this, person I'm thinking of can't see that, right, about herself. And so it's also, so let's come back to that because I just want to bookmark that for a minute and come over to the narcissistic side. And then I want to compare the two just for a minute. So what happens in those first couple of years for someone who might develop, and I know there's traditionally two types of narcissism, more of a covert and an overt.
Right.
So maybe talk about the covert narcissist dynamic with a caregiver and young child.
Mm-hmm. So with a covert narcissist, typically what happens is that the parent is quite narcissistic and they have to be the star of the show. So you need to be like me. You need to agree with everything I say. This is narcissistic fusion is what we call it. You have to be fused with me. You are an extension of me.
Yep.
With the covert narcissist, the message is that you can never be bigger than me. You could never be the star. I am. You are my supporting cast, and you will act as such. So we call it a closet narcissist. Same thing as a covert narcissist. They can often look like borderlines or even schizoid personality disorder because they've learned to keep it all so tamped down.
Mm-hmm. So fascinating.
It's really interesting.
Let's come back to borderline and the labels, the sort of labels that the DSM has chosen to use in the field of psychology. Why borderline? Why that word, and why narcissism? I mean, narcissism I think is obvious because the Greek mythology there, but borderline seems more.
And primary narcissism with Freud.
Yeah,
so the terminology, borderline came from, so borderline can refer to actual borderline personality disorder or the borderline disorders. And what they mean by that is borderline psychotic.
They're on the borderline of being normal / psychotic or something?
Yeah. So it runs it. So we run a continuum. I mean, honestly, if you're neurotic, you're doing really good.
Yeah, that's most of us.
This is the best we can hope for.
Yeah.
So we run all the way from neurotic to psychotic.
Okay.
So it doesn't literally mean that someone's on the edge of psychosis, but it's kind of this delineation between personality disorders and psychosis.
Yeah.
When you start to go into a psychotic disorder.
Yeah.
This personality disorder. But again, and this is what it really, I think it puts people off, but it's so important to call a spade and to really talk about what's happening with people because people are in pain. And I think besides a narcissist, I think for the most part, there is a relief for them when you really start to, and I don't talk to someone about being borderline, by the way, or being narcissistic, or
you just work with it.
Language, right? There's a way that you speak and there's a particular language that they respond to. But I find that people over the years, they really appreciate that you get how painful their life is and how they've had to twist themselves into this pretzel to become whatever that person needed them to be so they could feel any sense of love or stability.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so much. Man, so many questions here. Now, who comes into treatment? Because the exhibitionist narcissist doesn't typically come into treatment.
Typically not, unless their world is falling apart or they're forced to come, which means they're not really coming to treatment.
Exactly.
So spouses will force them, even workplace will say you have got to go to treatment or you cannot stay here.
Yeah. And the sort of more grandiose, so who comes into treatment is a borderline then would come into treatment. A covert narcissist would come into treatment, right? Come in to get help.
Yeah.
But they can be complicated to work with, right? Especially with, maybe we can get into the transference, countertransference here in a sec. But I just want to hang out at narcissism a little longer. A lot of people these days, that term gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
For anyone that's like self-centered, it's like, oh, they're a narcissist. And help the listener not do that. Like what are some signs, or is it really important to know that there's actually two kinds of narcissism? I've heard there's three, but is that important? I just want the sort of listener to not be one of the Instagram people that's just throwing around that term.
I know.
How do we get smarter here with the term?
It's really interesting because in a way, it's good because people with really horrendous behavior are getting called out and they're being called what they are and their behavior is being called out. And you get people who will say that I'm a victim of a narcissist.
Yep.
I trauma bonded with a narcissist.
Right.
That all may be very well true, but then we get into this victim mentality because I want to know, why did you get with a narcissist?
Yeah, exactly.
What happened there?
What does that say about you?
Exactly. And I think that's what people really have to focus on. I think that I don't know what to say about people who are slinging these terms around because they're doing it for their own purposes. They're going to do it anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
It's an attack of their own.
Yeah.
So they're feeling some vindication by saying, "Oh, this is a narcissist. I was with a narcissist." Maybe they were, maybe they weren't.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I think we do have to be very careful about throwing these terms around. And even in the psychological community, even, to say that I had a borderline in my office, people can be quite disparaging.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I have this caseload of borderlines and it's such a pain in the ass or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And these are disorders. What's so great about being able to work with disorder is that, oftentimes people will diagnose someone with clinical depression. Mm-hmm. And they'll just diagnose them as depressed. Typically, depression is attached, if it's chronic, over years, or even if it's something that you're in and out of. If it's something over years, almost always it can be tied to personality disorder. Mm-hmm. When the disorder resolves, so does the depression.
Mm. Yeah, that's cool. Can you talk about resolving a disorder? Because that's really inspiring, because it means that some people with a condition like this can actually heal.
Absolutely. So this is my favorite question that you've asked. I have to tell you, I just because this is my passion. This is my love. Mm. This is why I'm doing this podcast with you. We are in this time, and I actually use the word pandemic of, I don't want to do anything too hard. I don't want to do it if it takes too long. And our treatments are getting formed this way as well. Yeah. And when someone has had such relational trauma, and then sometimes, big T trauma, trauma, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mm-hmm. There is so much pain there, and it takes so long to unpack that. Mm-hmm. For people to really even develop a narrative, by the person themselves, there can be such denial about what was done to them that it could take them a couple of years to get to a space that, oh my God, that happened to me. Yeah. That really happened.
Right.
And to connect emotionally to that experience. So I really, this is my soapbox, if you will. I really want to get around this whole notion of short-term therapy for people who are really suffering and have been suffering over years, who are in and out of relationships, cannot make them work, in and out of work, cannot make that work. Mm-hmm. And again, that all runs a continuum. It all runs a continuum. But it takes a very long time to get underneath that and work through it. It's the only way is to work through it. There's no homework. There's no, there's no book. And that's what we
shortcut.
are. No, that we're about shortcuts. We're about books. If you read this, and I'm not saying that there's not good information out there, but then what are you going to do with the information?
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's a lot to work with personality disorder, but it's just a lot. It's change. Change is really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see this all the time in the relationship space that I'm in, with our students, my clients, my own marriage, just people, friends. We heal in the context of relationship, right? So that can be a relationship with a practitioner like you
Right.
or me over a long time, or it can be inside of a marriage. And I'm curious what you think of healing, say, borderline inside of a marriage with good guidance, of course, versus a person has the borderline diagnosis just going to weekly therapy for years. I'm curious if you could talk about maybe the difference
Yeah,
there.
that's a really good question. That's another good question. I think that therapy should really only be done in a therapy office. And that doesn't mean that couples don't disclose to one another, that they don't talk about, but one spouse should never become the therapist for the other spouse. Support is one thing, but I have people that will come into my office and they'll say, "Well, I don't have anybody to talk to this about." And I say to them, I said, "Well, to an extent, it's fine to talk about it, but really, a lot of this, it's for the therapy office. It's a very specific sort of relationship and a very specific thing that goes on. That does not mean that it's not additive, that friends, spouses, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, that is an additive to the process. It's wonderful. It's horrible when you have a spouse that doesn't support therapy.
Sure.
It's very difficult on the therapy process.
Absolutely.
When you have a spouse that's really supportive, it's fantastic. And you can feel it as a therapist, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Feel
nice.
it.
Well, that was helpful. There's another layer for me where, because you're sort of almost saying, if I have borderline and I'm married to, let's say, to my wife, and I share a little bit with her, and sort of what I heard you say was, most of the healing should happen, or the work should happen with you, the therapist. But I think what I'm suggesting is, couldn't it be accelerated if you're giving us exercises and ways of being and behaviors that I can start practicing day in and day out in my marriage,
So,
versus waiting till next week when I see you?
right. Well, so I wouldn't give you exercises. However, a very common borderline dynamic, a spouse might complain about their borderline spouse. I asked her to do this, this, and this, or I asked him to do this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
He or she said that they were going to follow through, and they didn't. And it's a lot around responsibility, taking responsibility. And really, what I would be saying to the other person, it's this round and round thing. I would say, why don't you just call her out?
Yeah.
Or him out, and just really confront it head on and say, I'm not going to tolerate it. And if this keeps going on, this is not a sustainable way to do a relationship.
Yeah.
You really do. I say this to everyone, of couples, everyone in my practice. Everyone has to have a bottom line.
Yeah.
Things
non-negotiable.
cannot go on forever and ever. Do you know? There does have to be a bottom line that this has to get worked out. However you work it out, you need to work it out.
Yeah, I mean, people
That's
think
what I would be saying.
Totally. I mean, people think they can't do better, right? They don't know that there's another option, and it's amazing how people's tolerance, their capacity to hang in there for 30 years.
You know what that is?
What?
Nobody wants to be alone.
Yeah, totally.
And that's all the disorders. That's not anyone, you might peg that more to the borderline, but that's all. The bottom line is that they don't want to be alone, and they will do anything not to be alone. And that is a very dangerous place to be.
Yeah. Which is really a common human experience, isn't it? That none of us really want to be alone, die alone, live alone for long periods of time. Like, it's just, and we know that loneliness kills, actually. So this is there's a human thing, but it seems you're saying I'm hearing that it's almost enhanced or accentuated with personality disorders.
It's their only focus on an internal level. So it's not the point to be alone, but can you be alone until you find the right person?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tolerate the aloneness and the space and say to yourself, I know what I want. I know I'm not going to get everything I want. I need to compromise, but I know these are my no-goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you wait.
You wait.
So it's not the
You
point
breathe.
you're right.
You work through it.
We're human beings, and you're
Yeah.
right. We develop in relationship, and that it's a wonderful thing. But too many people, and I think I said this to you when we met the first time, I've been wanting to talk to people in the dating space.
Yeah.
Too many people just accept whatever because they don't want to be alone, and they don't even realize they're doing it until they're in it. And then, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And then I'm here. Now I don't want to be alone, so I better work with it.
Yeah, I gotta work with kind of mediocre, and I'll just hang in there because at least I'm not alone.
That's right.
But if we kind of rewind the tapes to that person's childhood, right, in those first 3 years, and we think about how terrifying it is for a little baby to be alone, right? That's where it comes from, right?
At its core, it is a death fear.
Yeah, it's annihilatory.
That's right. That is at its core.
Yeah.
And when you are operating from that space, it is not good. But that is exactly right. And so the more neglect and abuse that you have in that relationship, the stronger the death fears are.
Mm-hmm.
So the lower functioning the person is, the more they have to have their object, even if it's just an internal object. There is a panic around not having the object.
So even if the person's beating me up, I have to have the object, right?
And I have to have the object. That's a really good example. I have to have the object that way because that was my original object.
That's all I know.
That's all I know. And this makes people crazy around domestic violence. Yeah. And that really was their map. We all have a lens through which we see relationship that was developed 0 to 3.
Mm-hmm. Big time. Yeah. And that becomes the sort of magnet or the homing device, right, for future adult partners.
Right. And so that's why people get into bad relationships, because they were in a bad relationship in the first place.
Totally. Hey guys, Jason here with a quick interruption. Please consider helping other people right now. One of the ways you can do that is to become a relationship coach. You invest in yourself, train, learn how, and then you get paid to help other people. I think a career as a relationship coach is pretty outstanding right now and a very hot thing to be doing because you can work from home, work for yourself, get paid well, and you're living a life of deep meaning and service to other people. If you want to check out our coaching program, go to relationshipschool.com/RCT if you want to apply. All right, let's hear from one of our level 1 relationship coaches, Lona from Canada, on what she had to say about our program.
Hi, I'm Lona. I'm a level 1 certified relationship coach, and I'm in Nanaimo, Canada. I'm a helper, and I'm super curious. And I love having conversations with people around what's really important to them. One of the things that really impressed me and was really transformative for me was how empowering it was for people to get in touch with their own experience. And the second thing that was really amazing and impactful for me was the transformative power of being witnessed, supported, and challenged by another person. As a result, I feel like I'm a better coach. I can help more. And certainly my curiosity has been honed. And I just think that anyone who's really interested in helping people to really get in touch with themselves, to evolve into greater versions of themselves, if you're that kind of coach, then the relationship coach training is something you should consider. I'm so glad that I did.
Okay, Lona, thank you so much for your effort and becoming a relationship coach with us. You can hire Lona if you go to relationshipschool.com/coaching. She's up in Canada, but she works anywhere in the world. And if you want to apply to our coaching training, go to relationshipschool.com/RCT to apply. All right, back to the podcast. I'm always interested in what you think of this, the people that say, well, I don't remember my childhood, and they're in this highly dysfunctional adult relationship. And I'm like, well, you can probably assume that those first 3 years were pretty hard. First 5 years, 7 years were pretty intense, and you blocked it out and dissociated because you had to get by.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to get that don't have a They don't understand psychology. They're not interested in personal growth. And they're just frustrated with their adult partner why they're acting this way. And I'm like, man, if you could only.
Yeah. And you know what, too, that I think is really sad about that? And I say this to people all the time. They really want to disavow that part of themselves, although they're acting it out.
Yeah.
They want to disavow that wounded child.
Mm-hmm.
Go away. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to know about it. Get out of my face. That was what was done to them.
Yeah.
Don't be yourself.
Totally. It's brutal, right? It's like,
it's brutal.
I mean, again, I think a lot of us grew up with parents who couldn't handle at least some parts of ourselves. But it's when it gets significant that, again, it becomes this disorder of the self, right? I've got to keep contorting to fit into who you want me to be.
That's right. And you'll even get that mildly.
Yeah.
Even with higher functioning people, you'll get that. These are people that I want everyone to like me. Why do I do that to myself? They're quite aware, right?
Yeah. What does it look like for the person listening? I'm imagining the listener is asking, like, okay, I'm with someone who might have borderline, as we've described it, or narcissism, covert narcissism, let's say. What does that say about me, the listener? So what does it say about the listener if they're with someone who they're concerned might have one of these disorders? What is a good move for them to start doing in terms of self-reflection? Or
I think it's really important to self-reflect. If you find that you're in a relationship and there's something off, maybe you don't know exactly, right? Mm-hmm. What the disorder is, but something's not right in the sense of how you function with one another emotionally. You really do have to ask the question, why did you even continue it? Yeah. Why are you there? What you have to question, what was it in your own history, your own self, that allowed you to be in that space? Because a really healthy, functioning person emotionally would have looked at that person initially, and 5 or 6 dates in, maybe 1 date in, would have been like, yeah, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. No, that's not working. Would be turned off.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, okay, and then I want to come back to my same question there. What does it look like? What does borderline look like in an adult partnership? What do we start to see?
There's a lot of clinging.
The borderline person gets clingy.
Yes, it can be.
What else?
Yeah, they can be clingy. They can have a hard time with responsibility. They don't keep up responsibility. They're bad with money. They are volatile. They can be quite volatile in their emotionality. They can have outbursts and just kind of be all over the place emotionally. So those are the primary markers.
Are they still in a weird dynamic with their mother, their adult mother, their grandmother, whatever their mother?
And I say this generally, I'm not bashing mothers, but it's always the mother. Uh-huh. It's always.
Yeah.
It is at its core, always the primary caregiver.
Yeah, which is.
And then the father too, or whoever else is in that sphere. But there's usually one person responsible, primarily.
And what would the dynamic look like? So let's say I'm a borderline and I'm in a relationship with you, and I'm needy and I'm clingy, I have money issues. And what am I doing with my mother? Am I on the phone with her a lot? Do we have a weird enmeshed relationship?
Yeah, it can be, or it could be a lot of fighting with the mother.
Uh-huh.
That's clinging too, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
A lot of
come here, go away kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And they can be talking to their mother, 3, 4, 5 times a day that wouldn't be horribly unusual to see with a borderline.
But clearly not a healthy differentiation from the mother.
That's right. Yeah. And you'll even get that. You'll get that with all the disorders. So it's very hard. This is one thing about differential diagnosis. It's very difficult most of the time to diagnose just via symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
There's a whole other, you really have to have a very detailed history. I get very detailed about interactions. What was affection like? How did it feel with your mother, your primary? How did it feel with your father? How would your mother have described you as a child? How would your father have described you as a child? Who were the other people in the family?
Yeah.
How did you navigate school? What were your relationships like in school?
Yeah.
So it's an entire history. And then you have to pay attention to your countertransference. That's huge. What's
which
going
is,
on in the room.
yeah, in our coaching training stuff, we call that coach entanglement. Can you say a word about countertransference? What do you mean by that?
So in personality disorders, they have what we call split object relations. And a healthy child develops whole object relations where they can see people in areas of gray. Not everything is so black and white. With the personality disorder, things are very black and white.
Yeah.
So how they operate on either side of the split, that is what they are going to draw the therapist into, because they need you to be in either side of that split to have that original archaic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go with the borderline. And I just have to make a joke here. And if anyone from my institute listens to this, the schizoid always gets left out. We haven't even talked about the schizoid.
Okay.
It kind of goes along with their disorder. But let's go with the borderline.
Yeah.
The two sides of the split for the borderline is that they operate, the positive side is the rewarding object. And then I'm the good girl or good boy in relation to that. Mm-hmm. And we connect through, we feel good with each other. We're just cuddling. Everything is fine. Everything is great.
Yeah.
The negative side of the split is the withdrawing object. And I'm a bad person. I've done something bad. I've pulled away. I tried to assert my independence and now I'm bad. Mm-hmm. And now that mother or object, they don't like me anymore. They don't love me.
And be clear, what is the therapist experiencing over here?
Both. You get drawn into both.
So you're saying the therapist in this case would, in those two object relations, would, the second one was, I the therapist or coach, start to feel bad. I'm bad. I've done something wrong.
Right.
Or you're saying the first one was like, I'm doing it right. I'm such a great guy. I'm such a great human. Look at me go.
Right. But then you'll also feel like you're kind of doing all the work for them.
Yeah.
You're filling in their sentences. They don't have any answers for anything. So you're giving them the answer. And then they feel good that this is a good dynamic. We both feel good. We feel good. We feel good. But I'm not activating anything in myself to really figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. Because they keep like almost delegating that to you unconsciously, right?
That's right. When you catch it, and you say, I've told you what I think over the past 2 weeks. I really want to know what you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're trying to develop the self, which is the self knows how to, mobilize and take action and put one foot in front of the other and follow through on something.
You go into the negative unit. So you're always, as the therapist or the coach, you're always going to be in one of those two sides of the split.
Yeah.
And then hopefully over time, there will be true activation and you can have a real relationship. But that takes a lot of time.
Wow. That's such a cool distinction there. And let's just come back to the narcissist, and then I have a few more questions here. In the covert, if I'm with someone who I think might have covert narcissism, what is my experience? What's happening in that adult relationship?
They oftentimes will be very idealizing. You feel like you're on a pedestal. You can get this with the manifest too, but they're more obvious. A manifest is really a pretty obvious, what you see in books and even lay people's books that they've written about narcissism. It's pretty obvious. The internal dynamic is the same with the closet narcissist or the covert narcissist. And with the closet narcissist, they will put you up on this pedestal and you'll feel that. You'll feel this, they'll come in, I love those shoes and you look so fantastic today. And they have to make sure that you feel good.
Yeah.
And by extension, they get to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if I get praised in that way, it starts to feel good to me and then I appreciate you.
I bask in your glow.
Yeah.
You're the primary. You get to be a star, but I get to get some of that too. And I just kind of stand over here and.
Yeah. And of course, this is accentuated early on in a relationship when people are infatuated in general. Okay. And then what starts to happen? So that's going on with me, let's say, if I'm with someone with covert narcissism, I start to feel, wow, they really think I'm awesome, and it feels pretty good.
Which never feels good to me because I think always the higher I am, the harder I'm going to fall.
Absolutely. I've learned that the hard way many times. Yep. Yeah. So what starts to happen in the dynamic over time? Because that obviously doesn't just go on day in and day out for years.
So vulnerability is extremely hard for narcissists, period.
Mm-hmm.
But let's stick with the closet because that's mostly what you'll see in your office. You'll see them manifest, but usually they're going to come in a couple, or as I said, their life is falling apart and they're desperate. But with the covert narcissist, at some point you're going to start asking about feeling. You'll feel the focus on you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is not unusual. Or they'll come in, and these are just examples. It's really kind of all over the place, but these are common things that happen with the closet narcissist. They'll come in and they'll tell you how good their week was. This went really well. Da 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 da. They have a very hard time with flaws. They have a very hard time with vulnerability around flaws. It's very difficult for them, even though they came in with an issue.
Shame. Probably.
There's a lot of shame, a lot of shame because they were shamed.
Yeah.
You're perfect. And if you're not perfect, then you're nothing.
Wow. Yeah. And then, cause this is the one that kind of gets thrown around a lot. I'm with a narcissist and I'm like, okay, what does that say about you? And what is that person's work then, that's with a covert narcissist? Cause sometimes the covert narcissist, that work might be slower and they might have a hard time. Often it seems like there might be more of a codependent dynamic, is like, I help you, the covert narcissist, and look how I prop myself up by being the kind of therapist in the relationship, and I'm so special. And I don't know, like, have you noticed that? And I'm curious what else we could say to the listener who might be with someone with covert narcissism.
Again, I think you just have to self-examine and figure out what it is. What is your dynamic in the relationship? Because oftentimes, mostly personality disorders wind up with each other. Now, there might be someone with more disorder and someone with a little less disorder, or vice versa. And then it's kind of like the identified patient in a family. Yeah. The other person kind of catches it all. They catch hell for everything.
Yeah.
And they really will act out both sides of the relationship. They'll kind of act out all the dark, nasty stuff of each individual, right? So somehow, and again, these dynamics are very complicated, and I'm just giving an example, but it could be any number of examples.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you have someone with anger issues, and then the other person is just calm, calm.
Peaceful.
They're projecting all of their anger into the other person. So it's not that person doesn't have anger issues, but probably is carrying around the anger, for doing all the anger in the relationship.
Yeah. It's like adolescence in a family. The adolescents tend to like absorb all the fucking unconscious bullshit and then they express it, right?
That's right. That's right. And usually the most sensitive is the one who acts it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Dang. Man, this is so rich. We're starting to wind down here. How does attachment play into this? Because I'm hearing some similarities around, anxious avoidant, anxious ambivalent styles, in terms of, because so much of this is all really relational, really.
Yeah. It's all
how do you start to tease out, or do you just make assumptions that, okay, 0 to 3, clearly there's attachment issues. Also, part of the injury is X, Y, and Z. Like, how do you weave in attachment?
I mean, it's just in there. There's no doubt about it. Attachment is very important. We don't focus on it in terms of the treatment. It's just part of all of the theory. Of course, their attachment is compromised.
Yeah.
That is just part of having a personality disorder. And then whichever attachment style can coincide with, each personality disorder. Yeah. But even that can be a bit all over the place. But certainly the anxious avoidant is more the schizoid disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So they're just kind of in there, but it's very important. And I don't know, do you know the adult attachment interview?
Yeah. Oh, I do. Amazing. Yeah, my wife knows it better than I do. I've just glanced at it a few times, but powerful.
Yeah. Very powerful.
Say something about the schizoid, so we don't leave this person out.
Of course. Schizoid. Well, this is what I'm going to start with. That is probably most of what you see in your office. It has the most variation on the surface in terms of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of schizoids that can look narcissistic. There are a lot of schizoids that could look borderline.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it's so, I mean, the gathering of information, how you feel with the patient, it just takes a lot of training and a lot of time to figure all of that out. But most of my patient load are schizoid.
Wow.
And I would say that's true for a lot of therapists.
Uh-huh. I'm just pulling up my
borderlines. If you don't get narcissists, you certainly do. But there are a lot of schizoids out there that get misdiagnosed.
Now, I'm pulling up the DSM here, Schizoid Personality Disorder 301.20. A pervasive pattern of detachment from social relationships and restricted range of expression of emotions in interpersonal settings, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 4 or more of the following, and then it goes on. So some people might misdiagnose this as antisocial because this person has a hard time being social, is what I'm hearing, being relational. They hide out more, they're more avoidant, is that? And then there's a whole avoidant personality disorder. So can you...
Avoidant in the Masterson approach would be the same. It would fall under schizoid personality disorder. And antisocial and, sociopaths, that's a whole other
category.
Disorder. Yeah. But that's the classic definition of schizoid. That is the most schizoid that you will see, very detached. And all schizoids want relationship.
For sure.
They just were so damaged in that relational pattern that they keep it all inside. But then again, this runs a continuum.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Masterson, but there's also what we call secret schizoid.
I'm not familiar
These
with that.
are people that look very social. They can have a conversation with you. They internally, a whole other thing is going on.
Interesting.
So that's the most fascinating disorder to me because it's just all over the place.
Did they grow up in a family with more neglect? Was that more of the feature of their childhood?
Neglect and sometimes neglect and too much, and then physical abuse or, very invasive parents.
So they had to go way inside to get away from any of it.
To keep any sense of identity to themselves.
Yeah.
Just a sense of being used.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to start wrapping up with a couple more comments and then questions. You said something really interesting when we first met and then today, that often people with a personality disorder are with someone else with a personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And then you said that this is actually quite ubiquitous, meaning, this isn't like some rare unicorn diagnosis. This is extremely common. And obviously it's areas of gray. So there's extreme versions of all of these, and then there's really subtle versions that anyone listening, including myself, might have, right? Tendencies. So can you say something about just maybe how common this is, just as a way to normalize this? And
Masterson believed, he said 80% of the people walking through my door have some level of disorder.
Wow.
I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
In my own experience. And again, you have to think about, people hear disorder and I think the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
People that just have kind of problems in their marriage and they're always winding up at the same place. And, that could just be very mild disorder, very mild personality styles that just, they're not personality disorders. They have a very hard time with reality. And so even your highest functioning person, you can say to them, why do you keep going there in that fight? Or why do you keep bringing up that topic? Why does that keep happening? I don't know, and then they'll go on this whole thing. They cannot pull themselves out of, okay, I just need to stay away from that one topic. Mm-hmm. We can survive this way. We're going to be fine. We don't have to agree on everything. That's reality.
Yeah.
Personality disorders have a very hard time with reality. Again, runs a continuum. So you can get a borderline who is really acting out and their reality testing is out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero.
I think totally. Stan Tacken likes to say it's like they like to bend reality. or try to bend reality.
Yeah. And I would say that about personality disorders, period. They're always bending reality.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Again, we got to kind of appreciate to try to be okay, right, with the self, with their situation. It's just like this old, outdated survival strategy.
It's right. It's so right. And as therapists, we have to learn to sit with the affective storms that they bring to us, because that's all their history. When anything is blown out of proportion, that's history speaking. Always.
Yeah.
When people can't calm down or get themselves out of it, that's always history speaking.
Yeah. Totally. Trauma, history, neglect.
Yeah, whatever that means. And so it's so important for people. I think that the two most important factors in good psychotherapy is that people are grieving, they're doing grief work, and in that they are learning to live in reality. So over time, the emotional isn't this, it's more this, which is just life. That's just life. And they learn to cope, but they have to grieve a lot to get in that space. There's so much that has to be cleared out. It's like an infection and letting it heal back over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important to keep people in reality, especially if we want good relationships, because you can't continue to be in fantasies or making things up, right? It's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Wow, this has been so rich. Thanks, Carolyn. I ask as we wind down here. I have tons of questions. There's a lot of reflecting I'm going to do after this, because I love psychology because it's just endless, right? We could look at humans from so many different angles.
The archaeology of the mind.
It's just I love
fascinating.
it. Yeah. We ask one of our missions here at the Relationship School is to reach young people with relationship education. And if I had a room full of 1,000 teens, let's say, and I could only teach them or say one thing to them about love or relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Love yourself. And if you're not doing that, figure out how to do it, because everything flows from there.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Carolyn, where can people find you, the Masterson Institute, and what you're up to? If they have more questions, or is there a place where people could reach out? And
they can email me at cb717-888@gmail.com.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Yes, my phone number, if someone wanted to phone, is 407-696-8800. Yes, and there's the website. I have my own website, carolynbankston.com. And then there is the Masterson, the International Masterson Institute website. So if there are any therapists out there that would like to do education, need supervision, this sort of thing, you can contact the Masterson Institute and we'll get back in touch with you.
Yeah, so cool. So many good resources. Yeah, I'm reawakened as of late around personality disorders, and I'm just grateful for your time and for all your wisdom in the trenches there with people. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for giving me the space.
Oh yeah, so Carolyn Bankston, LCSW. Go check her out at carolynbankston.com if you want to follow up with her. Very helpful resource here. I think some of you are probably in relationships with someone we kind of talked about today. And it's good to get skilled practitioners who know that landscape really well, right? Who train in it. Action step. If there was anything at all that resonated with you today about maybe one of your parents or yourself or a former partner or a current partner around borderline or narcissism, for example, I want you to just journal 5 sentences about it. Like, oh my gosh, I had an insight that it was related to so-and-so or my cousin or my ex-wife, whatever. And then I want you to share that with someone and start getting curious about your part in that. Now, some of you might have an undiagnosed personality disorder. I think that's interesting, right? And you want to do a little research and see like, I wonder if I'm like this. And no wonder relationships are difficult for me. And because remember, you don't have any cognitive memories of some of the injuries between 0 and 3. So it's going to be hard for you to go, oh yeah, I know, because, I have this abandonment depression or this thing go down with my mom or whatever. You probably have no cognitive memory of that age, but you might have lots of patterns that repeated over your life that could start to go, I wonder if I have some aspects of one of these disorders. Yeah. Remember, to be compassionate toward people with personality disorders, it's a disorder of the self. It's, in other words, to me, it's a fracturing. It's the self, the true self got really, really challenged in those first 3 years and had to adapt. Okay. And you could say it's maladaptive. It's whatever. It's adaptive, how you compensated or how people compensate. So let's have compassion and care and kindness toward these types of people, because you might be one of them. And let's learn. And let's learn to see if we can we all got to work with our limitations, guys. Right? We're all working with our history, our traumas, and how it plays out into the present relationship. So keep learning, keep growing, and stay connected to you. Talk soon. I've been telling you guys about my life-changing yoga practice and how my body is healing after decades of injuries. And that's thanks to Lit Yoga, my friend Laura Hyman, and her incredible yoga technique, really, practice. She combines physical therapy and asana yoga practice to help you get stronger in your core in all the right places. And it's coming from someone who knows the body deeply, as a person who's worked with so many injuries. And that's me. I'm an injured dude. And I need a yoga that is going to help me move effectively and efficiently throughout my life. And I'm getting stronger, and it's intense. It's awesome. And so if you are injured in some way and you're over probably, 35, 40 on up, and you love yoga or you like to move for 30 minutes a day and you're looking for something, I really recommend Lit Yoga. It's my new thing, and my wife turned it on to me. So Laura is giving you a free trial, basically a $1 trial. It's basically free. Try her yoga for a month. Okay. Dozens and dozens and dozens of classes recorded and live, guided by her and her crew that she's trained. And I imagine you're going to get stronger if you just try it for a month. Okay. So go to relationshipschool.com/LYT yoga. And then at checkout, make sure you enter the coupon code JAYSON, Jason, and you'll get your first month for $1. And then after that, I think it's like almost $50 a month. Check it out. I think you're going to dig it. As you know, I've dedicated my life to helping people with their relationships, right? I want to solve this problem so that all of you can work through your differences and have fulfilling, amazing, badass partnerships and relationships, family, coworkers, friends, whoever. And I have trained a ton of relationship coaches, almost 100 certified relationship coaches, to help you specifically work through your relationship challenges. So I want to invite you to a special deal we're offering to the podcast listener, where you can get 50% off your first month of coaching with one of our amazing relationship coaches. Okay, if you're tired of therapy, it feels like that's going around in a circle, or you want to actually set goals and accomplish your relationship goals, hire a relationship coach. Okay, go to relationshipschool.com/get coaching now, and then use the coupon code FIRST50 to get the 50% deal off your first month of relationship coaching. Super psyched to have our amazing coaches serve you and help you get to the next level. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.